We are entering a new era here. The first mood-lifting, antidepressant, happy plant.
We want rebel music, street music, music that breaks down people's fear of one another, music that knows who the real enemy is.
J'ai fait des films très très différents dans ma vie. Donc, il faut que je vous dise qu'est-ce que c'est qui m'a mené à faire ce travail pendant tant d'années.
Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another film talk session with me, Noval Yazid. I'm the festival co-director of Europe on Screen. And as usual, in all our film talk session, the session is being recorded and is broadcasted live on YouTube at the moment, so you can join from our YouTube channel at Europe on Screen. We also activate the Q&A box in our Zoom link here, where you can type your questions that will be answered during the Q&A session at the last part of the webinar, and the session will be conducted in English. And this afternoon here, we will talk about the film Movements of a Nearby Mountain, a beautiful documentary. And we already have here the director, Sebastian Brameshuber. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Perfectly. Hi.
Okay, great. Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Okay, I'm good too. And I understand that it's what time is it now?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, okay. All right, and yeah, first of all, congratulations for the film. I've seen it twice, and it's such a beautiful film, very well made film. And with this kind of observational documentary, obviously the first question will be, how do you know the subject in this case? How do you know Cliff? And how do you become interested in telling his story?
Well, I would actually not quite agree that it's an observational documentary. It is partly an observational documentary, but maybe we can go into that a bit later.
Of course.
No, the way I got to know Cliff was actually, I'm gonna put this like this so I hear myself better. Yeah. Was because I was shooting there for my previous film. I mean, on the location where probably 90% of the film takes place, which is Cliff's garage, which is located at an abandoned former industrial facility, basically. And I was shooting there a scene for my previous film, which was a feature documentary film where I portrayed the lives of a couple of teenagers from a village in Austria, close to where I grew up. And they basically went there, those teenagers went there to play paintball. So there was a paintball field, which later on disappeared. But while I was shooting there, I realized there was not only a paintball field, but there was also somebody working there in this garage. And so I went there and I got to know Cliff, and I asked him what he was doing, a bit about his business. I was surprised to find something like this there. I mean, it's a very remote place, even
Mhm.
for Austrian, even for Austria, let's say. I mean, you would not normally stop there.
Mhm.
And I was just surprised to find something like this, to find someone and running a business to export cars to Nigeria, something as
Yes.
global like this. In a place like, in a remote place like this, in the middle of the Austrian countryside, where I just wouldn't have expected it. So
Mhm.
I found immediately that this would be an interesting film. I mean, that it's an interesting subject, that Cliff was extremely intriguing as well as a person, as well
Yes.
as some of his colleagues that were still working
Yeah.
there. So somehow, I don't know, I came back after that, and I came back and I came back and again, and somehow this film came into existence.
And did Cliff receive your proposal immediately when you told him that you wanted to film him, or was there any resistance from him at first?
I mean, well, in the very beginning, there was not only Cliff, there was at least one, sometimes also two more people. One of
Mm-hmm.
them you see also in the film, Magnus, and then there was another guy,
Okay.
James, who actually quit the business, and Magnus also quit the business then after a while, and the only person left was Cliff. But I mean, I have to say that initially they were extremely welcoming to filming, let's say.
Yeah.
I mean, I just asked, can I come back? Can I bring my camera?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a filmmaker. So initially, there was no, I mean, there was a lot of trust, let's say, initially. But then when I actually really came back, that changed a little bit, because I think
Yeah.
maybe Cliff and also Magnus, they did not really think that I would come back initially.
Mm-hmm.
But then I came back and I said, okay, I really will come with a team, with a crew, with a camera, with a
Mm-hmm.
sound guy, and
Mm-hmm.
and I want to do a short film. That was actually the first thing that we did
Okay.
together, was a short film in
Okay.
2014.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I actually came back again and again, and they realized, okay, this guy is actually serious about wanting to do a film with us, I had to, let's say, pass a few tests. I don't know I could phrase it differently, but they invited me to a meeting. There's like this EBO association. So Cliff and also Magnus, they're both their ethnicity is basically Igbo, which is one of the
Okay.
three main ethnicities of Nigeria. And
Mm-hmm.
there is in this region in Austria, there is like a community, an Igbo community,
Mm-hmm.
and meet regularly, I don't know, maybe once a month or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to basically come to one of their meetings and explain my project in front of this community. And yeah, and when I did that, after that, it was okay, and I could come to film, basically. And I still felt there was some mistrust even then. I mean, that showed during the shooting, that maybe they would not show up as much as we agreed on, or as much as I thought they would be showing up in this garage.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, when the film was finished, and we were basically able to finish this short film, and it was presented at a festival in Austria, close to where they are based, and they were basically coming to the cinema and to the festival to watch the film, and they saw that it actually was not a film that portrayed them in a bad light, or that showed them in a in a negative way, and that they liked the film, and that was really a good base, basically, to do a feature film a few years later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was a process, but I mean, not a very uncommon process, I would say, not a particularly complicated process in comparison to other projects that I did, in terms of winning the trust of someone.
Yes, because we can see that Cliff trusts you totally. I mean, I don't see any scene where he is not comfortable. He's totally comfortable in front of camera. I mean, when you capture his daily activities, his conversation is just natural with his colleagues, with his customers. So I wonder if there are any scenes from the short film that is also inserted in this film, this feature-length film.
Yeah, there is. Well, I shot the short film which is a 20-minute short film on Super 16 millimeter.
Okay.
That was basically, I had the opportunity to put it short at that time to make a film with, I had like around, I think, 2 hours of Super 16 millimeter footage and the camera and so on. And so, yeah, I decided to shoot this film on Super 16, the short film. And then later on, when, I mean, I actually always had in mind to do a feature film as well. I always regarded the short film as a sort of exercise in a way. I mean, I don't want to, I think the film became more than an exercise, but anyways, I always saw it that way. And also as a process, as a part of this process that I just described of getting to know Cliff, also for them getting to know me and us and what it means to be in front of a camera, just what we described before. I mean, Cliff was very familiar already with the process when we started shooting the feature film. And so but also, I mean, since a few years passed, there was also changes happening on the location. I mean, the paintball field no longer existed when we started shooting. Magnus quit the business. The guy that you see in the film in the blue overall, but basically he was not actively working there anymore. He was someone that I imagined comes back from the past in a certain way in this film. So I wanted to bring this past into the film, and I had parts of this past captured on Super 16 millimeter for the short film, and I just was actually looking for a way to integrate some of this material into the film because of the reasons that I just mentioned, but also because I felt, since the film is dealing with recycling in a certain way and in reusing things and in or continuing to using things, and since there is also a certain economy when it comes to particularly images, I mean, I just found it an interesting, maybe also conceptual approach to use images that already exist and reuse them in another film. So you have about 3 minutes, I think, of Super 16 millimeter footage. I mean, that was shot on Super 16 millimeter a few years ago in this film as a sort of, I don't know, blurry influx from the past, I would say.
And another thing that that got my attention from the very beginning is obviously the very poetic title. That is before I saw the film. And then when I saw the film, of course, there are 2 poems. Not exactly in the beginning, but sometime in the beginning. And of course, another poem at the end with words like stepping towards the mountain. Can you talk about these poems and how do you come to the very poetic title?
So, I mean, the poems are actually, how can I say? I mean, it's not really poems initially, even though we made it into sort of a more poetic, we gave it a more poetic twist, let's say. The poems are actually based on a legend that is a regional legend from this region in Austria, which is called Upper Styria. And Upper Styria is famous in a way in Austria because of its steel industry and because of an ore mine, of a large mine that has been around for centuries, if not millennia. I mean, even the Romans have basically already opened this mountain to extract metal, basically for making their, I don't know, armored clothes or their swords or whatever they made at the time, or maybe just cups. But so it's a very old steel industry, and this mine is very iconic, also for the Austrian economic history and for the Austrian economy, basically. And so it's the discovery of this mine. There's a legend basically surrounding this mine and the discovery of this mine. And this is basically this poem, so to say, that you hear in the film, which is a water sprite, a sort of Aquarius that was captured by some man, and he basically was begging them to release him again, and they didn't release him. So he promised them, if they release him, he would either give them gold for 10 years, silver for 100 years, or iron forever. And they chose this iron forever. And then he showed them this mountain, this Erzberg, this ore mountain. And since then, the ore mountain provides the wealth for the region. And I found it very, I mean, I know this story since I'm a kid, because it's been told to kids in school when you learn about Austrian history and so on. And so it's, I found it quite interesting that basically also the place where Cliff works used to be part of the steel industry that is also in a decline, because, you know, steel is being, I mean, there's, let's say China is a big producer now, India is a big producer now. I mean, all this of course changed also in the global economy, but Cliff in a certain way is, you know, stays in a line of business that is not foreign to this region. It's he's working with metal. Sometimes it even looks like he's extracting metal from these old cars. So it's I don't know. There was a few images and maybe metaphors or associations, let's say, that I made between what Cliff is doing and what was the history of this region in centuries. So somehow it made sense for me to use this in the film and to draw a connection between the present and the past on that level also.
And yeah, towards
and the title. Sorry, because you asked me about the title, which I didn't answer actually now. So basically, I was always thinking, okay, I mean, the title was something that came quite late. I was thinking about it a lot of time, changing it from. I mean, I had many different names throughout the making of this film, but somehow also with my last film, there was a moment towards the end of the editing when this title somehow arrived, and I found it quite fitting. And I always had this image of a mountain, which is something very, you know, it's like the most immobile thing that you can think about. I mean, a mountain is there, like,
of course,
rock solid, so it doesn't move normally. But this mountain in particular moves because they are basically, you know, taking it apart and producing things like cars that would move around in the world. And so I just thought, like, the movements of this mountain are somehow what the title refers to in a way.
Okay, so that is quite profound. I mean, the decision to give such a poetic title to the film. And one more question from me before we move to the audience questions. I honestly did not expect that the film would show Nigeria. I always thought that it would be purely in the garage or a surrounding. What was the decision like that you need to show a little bit of Nigeria in the film?
I mean, it was a decision that the decision to shoot in Nigeria has been there from the very beginning. It was a sort of I don't know, like I knew from the beginning that I would shoot in a very associative way, that I would not necessarily look for a clear narration in the film, but that I was nevertheless having a sort of backup narration in case everything goes wrong. I was aiming to have at least the process from how for example, in this particular example, a green van that you see in the film that Cliff buys in Austria and that he fills up with all kinds of things, and then he ships it to Nigeria, and it reappears in Nigeria at the marketplace, and he sells the parts there. So this was a kind of process that I documented in much more detail than you see it now in the film. I mean, the idea was to have it documented in as much detail as possible in a way, and then just use as as necessary, and so it's very little that remained of it. But I just found it interesting towards the end, even though we had a lot of questions whether or not to include it in the film. But I found it quite interesting to see Cliff in this position. After basically when we went there and shot there, I sat at the editing table with also the editor of the film, and we basically thought like, well, are we going to use that or not? Because somehow it would make sense to stay exclusively in Austria and just in this garage and leave this part of the business out. But then again, we found it so interesting how Cliff is not is not coming home in these scenes in Nigeria, how the tone of the film doesn't change at all if we decide not to show him, for example, with his family, but just on the marketplace, and how he's also basically I don't know how to say, like his way of moving maybe, and his behavior changes a slight bit in comparison to Austria in the way that he deals with his customers there. And that it's interesting to see him there in the middle of this marketplace, because you can see that he belongs there, but you can also see that he already became a little bit foreign at the same time. And this is something I talked a lot with Cliff about, this feeling of belonging but not belonging, in neither here nor there. And so I found that quite beautifully reflected in the film. And I mean, for me, it was just very important and clear that I would not show him coming home. That if that would happen, that if that feeling would basically come up during the shooting, or if that feeling would be in the images or in the scenes that we shot there, that I would not use it. But since I felt it did not happen, I found it extremely interesting to use it. Also because maybe that was, I don't know if it was the main decision or the thing that made us decide to use it, but I also found it quite interesting with this scene that the Nigeria sequence starts with, is when Cliff, and when we see the van driving into the market. So it's like a POV of him driving into the market. And but it's not him driving like in Austria, it's someone else driving him. And I think that's also quite interesting. It's like Cliff is not getting out from the driver's seat, it's someone else driving Cliff, and he's going out from the passenger seat. Which I think in this story, where also how the position of Cliff changes from maybe from someone that you would consider underprivileged in Austria to someone who is, let's say, not overprivileged, but in comparison to the other people in Nigeria that he's selling to there, a certain more privileged position comes along with that. I found this shift in the character interesting, to make the whole character more complex, to show the complexity of the world we live in, basically, that it's not that you're not exclusively a victim and you're not exclusively a perpetrator, but everything at the same time in this complex world that we live in somehow, I guess.
And have you talked to Cliff after the film, whether he now feels like more like an Austrian, or I mean, he still have the mixed feeling of one foot steps in Nigeria and one foot is in Austria?
Yeah, I mean, he's now in Austria, I think, for almost 15 years. He's also applying for Austrian citizenship and will most likely have Austrian citizenship in the next few years. He really feels from what he says to me, but of course that's, what you tell someone in words and how you feel inside might be not maybe different things, but it might be more complex. But what he says to me, and I mean, I also can understand and see that in how he lives his life, is that he feels more at home in Austria. Right. And I mean, yeah, he really likes the region where he's living. I mean, he sometimes comes to Vienna to visit, but he doesn't like the city. He really likes this kind of rural, small town place where he lives. And he has a lot of friends there, and his son is also there. So yeah, I would say, I mean, he probably could explain it in more detail or how he feels about it. But from what he says to me, he feels more at home in Austria by now.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good. We have a few questions from audience who are joining us here. How involved are you in the pre-production and post-production process of the film? Do you help determine the overarching story or format and in post? And also, do you have any say in the final edits?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I was co-editing the film. I have I'm also a co-producer of the film. I'm the director and the writer, so I have basically full control over everything in the film. I mean, it's not that I seek to.
Okay.
I'm not a control freak to want to control everything. I'm actually. I mean, it was a teamwork, but I'm just saying, like, if the question is whether or not I had the decision, or I had the choice to decide on everything myself, if I had the liberty, let's say, to decide on everything myself, yes, absolutely. But it was a team. It was a collaborative effort with many people involved, like all films, I guess, most films, let's say.
Let's see.
Yeah.
The next question is, sorry. Are you still in a good relationship with Cliff and his friends? And did they come to watch during the premiere? And how was their reaction?
Yes, I mean, the film has premiered like a year and a half ago by now. So Cliff was there for the premiere in Paris, and we traveled to a couple of festivals also together. He was also there for the Austrian premiere, for the Viennese premiere, for the premiere of when we premiered the film in his city, basically also. We traveled together to Amsterdam, to ITFA, and to Reykjavik in Iceland to present the film together. So yeah, I mean, we are on very good terms, and he likes the film a lot, and he has been excited to basically travel with the film as well. So it was a quite pleasant for me too, because of course this is also something that you worry about after spending so much time on doing a film that you think is just to a certain person or to the personality of someone that you know, but then you have to, of course, show it to the person and see if the person thinks the same way. But luckily he felt the same way.
And is the film in any way improving his business?
Oh, that's a tough question. Actually, I have to ask him that. I don't know if it's really improving his business. I don't know. I don't know. It's a good question. I will ask him.
Okay, thank you. Another question is about, thank you for, the question is, thank you for such a beautiful film. Even the poster looks beautiful. Did you take any part in the poster making decision?
Well, in the decision, yes, but in the making, I mean, I have a great distributor for the film. It's a Austrian, Viennese-based distributor, but a French guy called Pierre-Emmanuel Finzi. He runs a cinema and a distribution company named Film Garden. And he cares a lot for details. So he was actively looking for an illustrator that he found in Berlin, who is doing posters for movies, actually, for, let's say, for this kind of movies. And this illustrator came up with this beautiful illustration of the that you see on this poster now, actually.
Yeah, I like the choice of the colors, the very striking blue and yellow.
Yeah. I mean, we tried to do something because the film is very quiet. So I mean, obviously the idea was to be a bit more loud with the poster. For the cinema release, we had a cinema release in Austria, and in order to, make people look at something in the streets, we thought like maybe flashy colors would be nice. Yeah. But,
and since it was released in cinema in Austria, how was the reception there?
I mean, the reception was, positive, I could say. I mean, I guess with this kind of films, you cannot expect to get like, hundreds of thousands of people watching your film, but we had a few thousand, let's say,
Yeah. Mm.
that came to watch the film. Yeah, it was not particularly great, let's say, the cinema release in terms of the number of the audience, but it was also not. It was okay. It was like satisfactory, let's say, within the margins that we expected, I would say. And yeah. I mean, there was. I can show you. Wait, I'm gonna just get something to show you.
Okay. This is interesting.
Yeah, so there has been a nice DVD release.
DVD, I see. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see it properly, but it's with this.
Yeah, but I wish I wish they keep the same poster for the DVD cover.
Sorry?
I wish they keep this. They will use the same poster for the DVD cover.
No, that's actually the DVD cover. So that's already the poster is just on a very small.
I see.
Yeah,
okay.
here on the back.
Yeah.
But it's like it's a quite nice DVD edition for Austrian films. It's like a, how you say, like an anthology, I guess, of Austrian films. So it has been released. So it has been well received. I mean, we received a number of awards also, and no, it was I'm really, I mean, quite happy and satisfied with how everything went with this film.
Okay, that's great. And another question is from our audience: are you interested in directing fiction films someday?
Yeah, sure. I mean, honestly, I mean, well, yes, I am, and I also write actually on something a bit more, even more clearly fictional and really written. I mean, there, as I said in the beginning about the observational documentary, there is so many scenes in this film that have been, if not scripted, but at least very well prepared and repeated and rehearsed. So, I mean, this film was also, I mean, in the very first, in March 2019, when it premiered in Paris at Cinéma du Réel, which is a documentary festival, even though even there the boundaries are getting more blurry in terms of these genres, let's say. But at the same time, it was presented at an Austrian festival in the fiction film competition, or section, and it was also actually awarded there for best camera for fiction film. So, and at the same night, it was awarded best documentary in Paris. So I think already this has a kind of, it's so ambivalent in terms of what it is. And I like that. So I think even though I do fiction film and I direct maybe a more clearly fictional film, I mean, I know there is a lot of differences, obviously, because, in the way you work mainly. For me, it's not so much in the result, I guess, but in the way you work that the big differences lie. But so I'm writing on something which would be a little bit more clearly fictional than this film.
Oh, great! Looking forward to it. But yeah, since you mentioned that the cinematography of this film has won awards in addition to the film in general itself, that is also one thing that I noticed. The technical quality of this film is flawless, I would say. I love the sound, I love the cinematography as well, and I understand that it's not easy, especially for a documentary film, to capture these technical elements well. So what do you say, or based on your experience, what can you share with emerging filmmakers who want to achieve not perfection, but at least some kind of excellence in the technical quality?
Yeah, I mean, I think one idea that I threw overboard very early in my documentary filmmaking is that you have, I mean, at least for me, I think there's great films that there's great run and gun documentaries, like this kind of direct cinema,
Yeah.
not caring much about the quality of the image, basically being really interested in capturing maybe in a sort of Frederick Wiseman-like or Maley Brothers like way. I mean, this can be great and very rewarding, and I love some of the films. I just it's a matter, I guess, also of personality for me. I learned relatively early that this is not the way I want to work, because maybe of a certain perfectionism that is part of my character. So I realized that I'm really caring a lot about the framing and the quality of the image and the quality of the sound and I test a lot the cameras before. I mean, for example, for this film, I mean, with every film I care more about these things, and for this film we did a lot of testing with the cameras and the lenses. Also, we used very particular lenses, actually, old lenses. Lenses from the 80s that we bought a set of them for this film and used it on a quite contemporary camera. And so I mean, and then I work for a long time with the same DOP, even though in this film there is 2 DOPs. But I mean, Clemens Hufnagel, who I worked with also on my previous feature film and on 2 previous short films. So we have a certain understanding of how we do things, and some things, and this is quite nice, go without saying. And then I worked with a cinematographer from Berlin, Jenny Lu Ziegel, who was basically shooting the part in Nigeria. And we also share a certain, also with her, I share a certain idea of cinema, I would say, that helps a lot when you work with someone. And I don't know, I just think that if you look for something like, I mean, it's far from perfection. I wouldn't even know what that term would mean in terms of filmmaking, actually, but definitely if you look for a certain quality, I guess just trusting in that you don't have to, you know, be there at the right time or at the right moment all the time with the camera on, but just trusting that being there and observing and trying to repeat what you see and just taking the time to really think about what you want to shoot. I think that helps a lot. And one particular great exercise was actually the shooting on Super 16mm, because you have so little material. I mean, you have so little time. You're really there with the stopwatch. I mean, literally, I was there with the stopwatch because I knew that every second that I shoot is precious. And if I mess up, there is no more stock that I can shoot.
Film stock,
exactly. And also I have to say that with now these new cameras that use so much space, you know, like gigabytes and gigabytes and gigabytes, you also become a little bit more careful, because you just, I mean, you don't want to end up with like crazy amounts of material and data that you have to handle. So yeah, I just think that it makes sense to think about really what you want to shoot and create an environment where you have the luxury to take your time and to repeat. And part of it is, of course, to make the people that you work with feel comfortable, like to make, I mean, in the case of Cliff, for example, that he also understands that it's not like, okay, I'm doing my daily business and you're just there with the camera and you film me doing it, but that it means like, okay, you interrupt what you're doing, we position the camera, then repeat what you were doing. It's a certain working relationship that you need to form with the person that you're filming. And
Okay, well, that's a very good input, you know, on the taking time and observing and careful planning as well in the production. So Sebastian, thank you so much for spending time with us. And the film is still available until the next 5 days. So I hope more people will watch the film after watching this interview. And before we finish, we need to do a photo session where we look at the camera, and I think the technical host here will guide us.
Hi everyone, so please look at your camera and stay still for 1 to 2 seconds, and I will count to 3. 1, 2, 3. One more time. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you so
Thank you.
much. Good luck with your next project.
Thank you.
Looking forward to that fictionalized film or project. Yeah,
Yeah, hopefully we will screen it again in Jakarta. So
sure. And I hope the pandemic is over so that we can invite you to come here.
yeah,
or-
that would be great. Yeah. Let's hope
Yeah.
for it. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. All right.
Okay, Nawal. Nice talking
Thank
to
you,
you.
Sebastian. Nice talking
Have a
to you
nice day.
too. Have a good day. You too. Bye.
No, bye-bye.
Oke, that was it. Demikian tadi live talk atau live interview dengan Sebastian Brameshuber, Director of Movements of a Nearby Mountain. Very moving documentary, very poetic documentary. You can figure out the poems, bisa dicari puisinya apa sih di film tersebut. Filmnya masih available sampai tanggal 27 November, hari Jumat. Dan sesi film talk berikutnya adalah besok. So the next film talk session will be tomorrow, Tuesday 24 November, hari Selasa 24 November. Another documentary, filmnya Akasa My Home dari Romania bersama sutradaranya Radu Sionisio. Oke, don't forget to tune in to europeonscreen.org dan sosial media kita at Europe On Screen, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Have a good time, have a good festival. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen.